There are forces of good and forces of evil at work in the world today. What are these forces? Who is responsible for the good? And who is responsible for the evil? Richard Schaff talks about current events which are rarely discussed by the mainstream media, events that affect us all. This program seeks to identify, to inform, and to equip the believer for what's ahead. Welcome to What in the World is Going On?
This is What in the World is Going On. I'm your host, Richard Schaff. Our program is sponsored by Link, and here only by the grace of God. At the end of today's program, I'm going to have a special announcement for you. So if you're getting ready to tune me off, wait until the end. I have something I want to share with you. Something I read this past week from a man that I happen to admire to a large extent, Steve Bannon, former advisor to President Trump. Recently, Steve Bannon warned of what's coming to America and warned of what we are all next. We will be involved. I'm quoting Steve Bannon. The first tenet of psychological warfare is to break you to become complicit, compliant, to make sure all your actions in human agency will be futile. A quote from Steve Bannon. He didn't stop there. Next, he warned of what's to come, and it appears that America is on a fast track to this. He continued with his warning on psychological warfare, saying, with information, you can be armed to take action in a world gone astray, and that you will never succumb to psychological warfare, which is to break your resistance, which is to make you complicit. Don't be complicit to the dangerous narrative that the left is trying to get you to accept. Stay informed, be aware, and defend your God-given constitutional rights, those rights you deserve as a citizen of this great nation. Thank you, Brother Steve, and thank you, folks, for letting me share those words with you. We've talked over many programs about what's happened, the fallacies of the Biden administration. But where has it brought us? I want to look at that today, and we'll give a couple of examples on what's contributed to our being there. But we've covered that before, and we're going to continue to cover it. But now it seems to have had a big effect on Biden's approval rating. You see, I just got a report that it is now plunged to 37% favorable and 52% disapproval of President Biden. His approval ratings are in a total free fall as we head into the holiday season, with only 37% of Americans giving old Joe the thumbs up. Yes, just 37% of Americans questioned in a recent Quinnipiac University survey say they approve of the job Biden's doing as president. 52% give him a thumbs down. This poll was conducted October 15th through the 18th and released on Tuesday, October 19th, and reported by Fox News. Adding to Biden's political peril, just 28% of registered independents give the president a thumbs up on his job performance, while 56% do not. The Quinnipiac survey indicated that Republicans by a 95-3 margin disapproved of how the president's handling his duties in the White House, with Democrats approving 80-11%. Other findings in the poll, by a 52-41% margin, Americans say the country's worse off today than a year ago, while opposition to a wall along the nation's southern border with Mexico stands at 49% down, with a high of 64% in 2017. The Quinnipiac poll showed that 76% in the GOP want Trump to run again. An overwhelming majority of the Republicans want to see former President Donald Trump launch a third try at the White House. This according to the Quinnipiac University poll. A full 78% of adults identifying with the GOP said they'd like to see Trump as their nominee in 2024. 16 opposed him. The former president's support is rising. In May, the same poll showed 66% favored him running in 2024, with 30% opposed. 94% of the Dems don't want Trump to run again, while 4% say they do. Independents have the same figure as the overall population, 58 for, 35 against. As for how the country is doing under the first year of Biden, there's another sharp divide. A slight majority, 52%, say the country is in worse shape today than a year ago. 41% disagree. As on other issues, those numbers differ by party affiliation. 66% of Democrats say the country's better off, while 94% of Republicans think it's worse off. 56% of independents think the country's worse off. As for the top three issues that Americans believe the country's facing, the economy, 19%, COVID-19, 16%, immigration, 14%. But you see, Biden's in deep trouble, according to this poll, in every group. Even Lipster pollster, liberal pollster, John Zogby, is saying there's a big problem for him. He says, and I quote, "At this moment, Biden is in real trouble." Biden's had more bad polls, including two, the Gallup and Pew, which show double-digit dives in approval, and Biden underwater. The Pew poll also indicated that Biden was losing ground with black and Hispanic voters as well. Biden lost 18 points in his job approval rating among black people in the last 2 months, 16 points among Hispanics, 14 points among Asians, 8 points among white people. Pew also found the same problem for Biden that we previously reported on from a Fox poll, with most people finding him not mentally sharp enough to hold the office. On top of that, there's a third poll from Rasmussen showing that in a new election, President Donald Trump would win by 10 points, and that 1 in 5 Democrats would now vote for Trump. Record high favorable numbers for Trump in Iowa. That's the headline. Recently, our former president went out to Iowa to speak. It was his first trip to Iowa since leaving office. The article, and I'm referencing it, noted that President Donald Trump went to Iowa for the first time since the 2020 presidential election with an all-time high in favorability ratings in the first in line of the nation caucus state, as he openly flirts with a White House bid. This according to the latest Des Moines, Iowa Register Mediacom Iowa polling. The survey comes as President Biden's approval numbers continue to dip following his chaotic Afghanistan withdrawal. Critics, of course, have referenced this as an embarrassing botched job. Boy, isn't that putting it mildly. This also follows a dramatic surge in migrants across the nation's southern border and another surge in COVID-19 infections. 53% of Iowans have a favorable view of Trump, while 45% disapprove. 2% have no opinion. Trump is viewed favorably by 91% of Republicans, 73% of self-identified evangelicals, 68% of rural voters. 61% of men view Trump favorably, while only 52% of women see him in an unfavorable light. Independents are split, with 48% viewing him favorably, 49% having an unfavorable view. Biden's approval rating in the poll stands at 31% in Iowa, with 62% of adults disapproving of the job he's doing. From Hannity, I got this. He notes that Joe Biden is leading the Democrats over a political cliff. Sean Hannity issued a dire warning to Democrats heading into the 2022 midterm elections, saying President Joe Biden is leading his party over, quote, a political cliff. Some 70 days since Joe Biden abandoned our fellow citizens, friends, and allies in Afghanistan. He's not mentioning these hostages held by the Taliban at all now. and Hannity's bringing it to the forefront. He asks, doesn't he remember 9/11? Afghanistan is only one of the many self-inflicted disasters, all caused by Joe Biden, and all of them preventable. A quote from Sean Hannity. President Biden's approval rating is shrinking to record lows as his administration struggles to contain crisis after crisis, with new data showing just 38% of voters back the Democrats' performance. Biden's approval rating hovered in the low to mid-50s during his first months in the White House, but the president's numbers started sagging in August in the wake of Biden's much criticized handling of the turbulent U.S. exit from Afghanistan and following a surge in COVID this past summer. This among mainly unvaccinated people due to the spread of the highly infectious Delta variant. This while the nation continues to combat the coronavirus. This, the worst pandemic to strike the globe in a century. The plunge in the president's approval has also compounded by the latest surge of migrants trying to cross into the U.S. along our southern border with Mexico. That was reported and is covered pretty good on Fox News. By the way, that is the border that the president has been to. It was many years ago. He's been a motor campaign drive-through by limousine. He was out there campaigning, as I said, many years ago. And that's the same border that the vice president, well, she hasn't quite found the hot spots there yet. She may. Well, why the Biden fall? And just a couple of reasons we're going to mention. As I said at the beginning of today's broadcast, we've talked for several weeks, as I'm sure you may even get tired of hearing, what's really happening out there. Going to just mention a couple of them today. But what we are looking at now is where Biden is at as these catastrophes have been coming upon us one by one. Now, the Pentagon confirms just this past week, there are nearly 450 Americans still trapped in Afghanistan. The Pentagon confirmed Tuesday, October 26th, that upwards of 450 citizens remain in Afghanistan. This after the U.S. military completely withdrew from the country in August. That's a number significantly higher than initially claimed by the Biden administration. Senator Jim Inhofe from Oklahoma said, and I quote, "One of the million confusing things about this whole thing is that we really don't know how many Americans are left in Afghanistan. The administration's number of U.S. citizens left keeps changing. We all understand that. It's very confusing." His quote, his words. In terms of how many American citizens we estimate are currently in Afghanistan, the Department of State is in contact with 196 American citizens who are ready to depart. Arrangements are being made for them to do so either by air or over the ground. There's another 243 American citizens that have been contacted and are not ready to depart, either because they want to stay in Afghanistan or they aren't ready. The senator's words. Under the Secretary of Defense for Policy, Colin Powell, was responding along with our senator from Oklahoma. They noted this total of 439 American citizens still in Afghanistan is up from the 363 the State Department had told congressional staff just last week, which itself was up from the estimate of roughly 100 the administration said we had in September, as reported again by Fox News. Another reason that we're having the problem, as I said, we'd mention a couple. It's now been predicted that over 2 million illegal aliens have crossed the border in the last year. The last 12 months saw a record total of over 2 million illegal aliens coming across our southern border, reported by Breitbart News. The total number of illegals for fiscal year 2021 consisted of about 1.66 million who were successfully apprehended by Border Patrol before ultimately being released, and around 400,000 gotaways. Those are the one that managed to evade authorities and sneak into the country undetected. This represented a 315% increase from fiscal year 2020, which saw only about 400,000 illegals apprehended by Border Patrol. In addition, the rate of apprehension for alleged family units of illegals skyrocketed by over 763%, while the rate of unaccompanied minors being apprehended rose by 374%, and single adult apprehensions increased by 235%. Have you watched your news? Have you looked at Fox News? Have you seen the hordes on our border? It's unbelievable, folks. And what are we doing with them? Well, and I didn't even have this down to bring to you. I just found some reports this recently coming in. We're flying them in the middle of the night to your state. Pennsylvania, Florida, Texas. We're bringing them in the middle of the night and dropping them off. They're not even being vetted. They're not checked for COVID. There's no masks required. They're here. You're going to educate them. You're going to take care of them when they're sick. You're going to take care of them when they're hungry. Yeah, you're going to feed them. This coming in illegal aliens. One day they'll be seeking citizenship. Wonder how they'll vote. How do you think they'll vote? And why do you think we're being so carefree about how many we're bringing in? It's a shame, folks. Our country's being taken over. It's a shame. Our country's being destroyed. On top of everything else, according to Michael Snyder, a report I received just recently, he says, and I quote, "We could be potentially seeing 2 major wars." Historically, the start of most wars hasn't been a surprise, he notes. Usually there's a very clear buildup before hostilities begin, and we're seeing the same problem today. For example, by now it should be exceedingly clear to everyone that Israel and Iran will be going to war. Both sides have been talking about the common conflict for years, and everyone knows, causing the, quote, mysterious explosions, end quote, inside Iran. And everyone knows who's been attacking Israeli commercial ships. A shadow war has already begun. It's been going on for quite some time. And at some point, missiles will start flying back and forth between the two countries. Likewise, by now, it should be exceedingly clear that China very much wants to invade Taiwan. Reunification is the top national priority for the Communist Party, and they're being warned. We are being warned that Chinese people are being prepared by the leader of China, who has apparently decided that Taiwan is, quote, not a problem that will be passed down to the next generation, end quote. From a U.S. perspective, the goal is to delay these conflicts as long as possible. But China has just been getting more and more aggressive with Taiwan. In fact, the Chinese military recently sent 77 military aircraft into Taiwan's air defense identification zone. Taiwan has reported a record number of incursions by Chinese warplanes into its air defense zone. The self-governing island said a total of 39 Chinese military craft entered that zone one day. That was more than the 38 planes that had flown in that zone the day before. This shocking provocation led one British news source to boldly declare that China and Taiwan are on, quote, the brink of war, end quote. And that isn't too far from the truth, folks. In response, the head of Taiwan's government had some very tough words for the Chinese. Here are those words. China has been wantonly engaged in military aggression, damaging regional peace, said the Premier of Taiwan. And he also declared and referred to the fact that Taiwan is depending on the United States to protect it from China. When China finally invades Taiwan, the U.S. and China will instantly be in a state of war, and everyone understands this. At one time, the Chinese had hoped to peacefully reunify Taiwan, just like they did in Hong Kong. But that's out of the picture now. Communist Party's leaders in China have realized they're going to have to take Taiwan by force, and so they're looking for a golden opportunity. Well, with feeble Joe Biden in the White House, and with the American people deeply tired of wars, this may be the best chance for the Chinese Communist Party to act, and they certainly realize this. So, could they pull the trigger on an invasion in the months ahead? Let's hope not, because such a conflict would throw the entire globe into a state of chaos. But you know the clock is ticking, because, as noted above, we've already mentioned that the leader in China has determined that Taiwan is not a problem that'll be passed down to the next generation. Here, the Chinese president said, and I'm quoting, how he had previously expressed his aims to annex the island by suggesting, quote, there is no room for any form of Taiwan independence. The other threat? Well, just like his predecessor, the new Israeli Prime Minister Bennett, has promised to never allow the Iranians to develop their own nuclear weapons. And everyone agrees the day is now closer than ever. In his speech at the UN Council Assembly, Prime Minister Bennett declared that, quote, Iran's nuclear program has hit a watershed moment, and so has our tolerance. Words do not stop centrifuges from spinning. We will not allow Iran to acquire a nuclear weapon. With quite dramatic candor, meanwhile, IDF Chief of Staff Avery Kovalsky publicly declared that the IDF was preparing fresh operational plans for a potent military strike. He noted that Iran's nuclear progress has prompted the IDF to, quote, speed up its operational plans with a fresh budget to do so, and that the IDF has greatly accelerated preparations for action against Iran's nuclear power. Needless to say, a full-blown war between Israel and Iran would also throw the entire globe into a state of chaos. And folks, it's coming. In fact, a top Iranian official just said that war with Israel has already started. I'm quoting him now. The war with Israel has already started. This, a quote from the Iranian Foreign Ministry. He noted, and I'm continuing to quote, Israel has carved out attacks that were intended to destroy our nuclear program for peaceful purposes. It murdered nuclear science and harmed the Iranian people. Iran is accused of terrorism, but there's no good or bad terrorist. The whole crisis in the region is Israel's fault. End quote. If either of the wars were to fully erupt before the end of this calendar year, economic activity all over the planet would be greatly affected, and it'll make global supply chain problems far, far worse than they are even now. In addition, global financial markets would almost certainly go totally crazy. Much more importantly, in either case, the United States would find itself involved in a new war. If China invades Taiwan, the U.S. military would instantly be forced into action. And if Iran and Israel go to war, the U.S. would definitely not stay on the sidelines. Needless to say, most Americans are not even thinking about the war right now. But easily war could be coming, and it can't be too far long before it's actually here and with us. For our closing remarks that I mentioned at the beginning of our program, I'd like to invite you to call me personally with any questions or comments that you have on this program. This program, What in the World is Going On, is brought to you on a fairly regular basis. I'd be happy to discuss it with you. Or if you have questions about our sponsor in Log Homes. Our sponsor, Lincoln Log Homes, one of America's leading log home companies. I happen to be president of Lincoln Log Enterprises, and I'm here at my toll-free number. Write it down, 800-843-3310. And normally around the phones between 9 and 1 Eastern, just to take calls from our dealers and other prospects. And now for you, 800-848-3310, 9 to 1 Eastern Time, Monday through Friday. Or call anytime, leave a message 24/7 on our Lincoln Log Home answering service. By the way, if you still got your pen, If you want to refer to our webpage, it is Lincoln Log, no S, just log, L-O-G, starting with an E, enterprises.com. If you didn't get it, don't worry. Give me a call. I'll give it to you again over the phone. View our webpage. Any questions on log homes? Want a great deal on a log home? I'm president of the company. I am your voice on this program. We are brothers. I'll be happy to deal with you personally, give you factual information, try to answer any questions you got. Don't know the answer, I'll try to get it for you. Lynn, stay strong, stay well, stay free, and folks, keep your knee bowed to the Lord of the universe. Goodbye until next week.